psychological horror, echoes of the mind. The mist hung low over the moors, a thick, swirling veil that concealed secrets as old as the earth itself. Sarah Winters stood at the window of her small city apartment, her gaze fixed on the world outside, or what little of it she could see. It was a dismal, gray morning, much like most days in her life, and she found herself yearning for something more, something beyond the confines of her mundane existence. As she sipped her lukewarm tea, the postman's footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. He was a familiar figure, an elderly gentleman with a stooped back, the weight of years of delivering mail etched into the lines on his face. He slipped the day's letters through the slot, and they fell onto the floor with a soft thud. Sarah set her tea aside and bent to collect the pile of envelopes. Most of the mail was unremarkable, an assortment of bills, advertisements, and a postcard from her sister's recent vacation. But there was one letter that stood out, its cream-colored envelope adorned with an elegant script that seemed out of place among the mundane surroundings. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she examined the letter. It was addressed to her, and the return address was unfamiliar. Mr. James Thornton, Ravenswood Village. She knew of no one by that name and had never heard of Ravenswood Village. Intrigued and curious, she carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a neatly folded letter. "Dear Ms. Winters," it began, the ink on the paper dark and crisp. "I hope this letter finds you in good health. My name is James Thornton, and I am a writer in search of something extraordinary, a story that defies explanation and challenges the boundaries of the human mind. I have heard of your work in the field of psychology, and I believe that you may hold the key to unraveling the enigma that has eluded me for so long." Sarah's brow furrowed as she continued reading. James Thornton's words were eloquent, his prose captivating. He spoke of a village hidden in the heart of the northern moors, a place untouched by time, where the very air seemed to hum with ancient secrets. He wrote of unexplained phenomena, of dreams that transcended reality, and of a darkness that clung to the village like a shadow. "Ravenswood Village," the letter concluded, "awaits your arrival. I believe that together, we may uncover the mysteries that lie within its mist-shrouded streets. I implore you, Ms. Winters, to join me on this journey into the unknown. Together we may discover the truth, or perhaps descend into madness." Sarah's heart quickened as she read the final words. The letter was unlike anything she had ever received, a curious blend of fascination and trepidation. She glanced at the date, nodding that it had been written only days before. Why had James Thornton reached out to her, a psychologist with a modested practice in the heart of the city, and what was this mysterious village he spoke of? Her thoughts drifted to her own past, a childhood haunted by shadows, by a memory that she had long tried to suppress. She remembered the fear, the sense of helplessness, and the knowledge that there were forces beyond understanding. Sarah had chosen a career in psychology to make sense of the human mind, to bring light to the darkest corners of the psyche. Perhaps now, she thought, it was time to confront her own fears, to venture into the darkness and seek answers. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself unable to shake the feeling that the letter held a key to something she had been searching for, something she couldn't quite name. She paced the cramped confines of her apartment, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and possibilities. Finally, in the dim light of evening, she made her decision. She would go to Ravenswood Village. She would accept James Thornton's invitation and step into the unknown. The journey to the village was a blur of winding roads and overgrown foliage, the mist obscuring the path ahead. Sarah's small car navigated the narrow lanes, the engine struggling against the relentless ascent. She couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation, the weight of the moors pressing in on all sides. The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time she arrived. The village appeared suddenly, as if emerging from the very mist that had concealed it. Ravenswood was a place untouched by modernity, a relic of a bygone era. The buildings were ancient, their facades weathered and worn. Sarah parked her car in front of a small inn, its wooden sign creaking in the breeze. There was an eerie silence that hung over the village, broken only by the distant tolling of a church bell. As she stepped out of her car and looked around, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if the very air was thick with secrets, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. James Thornton's invitation had led her here, to this enigmatic village on the moors. It was a place where the boundaries between reality and the unknown blurred, where the past whispered in every cobblestone and every rustling leaf. Sarah knew that she had embarked on a journey that would test the limits of her understanding, a journey into the heart of darkness itself. And as she stood in the fading light of day, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made a choice that would change her life forever. The inn's door creaked as Sarah pushed it open, and she stepped into the dimly lit interior. The place felt ancient, as if it had been frozen in time, with worn wooden beams overhead and flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. A few locals huddled in dark corners, their hushed conversations pausing momentarily as they glanced at the newcomer. The innkeeper, a weathered man with a face etched by years of hardship, looked up from behind the bar. His eyes bore a mixture of curiosity and suspicion as they settled on Sarah. "Evening, miss," he greeted her, his voice gravelly. "Good evening," Sarah replied with a polite nod. "I'm looking for someone, James Thornton. I was told he might be staying here." The innkeeper's eyes narrowed slightly, and he regarded her cautiously. "Mr. Thornton, you say?" "Yes, that's right," Sarah confirmed. The innkeeper hesitated for a moment before gesturing to a corner table. "He's over there, miss. Be mindful, though. Outsiders aren't always welcome in Ravenswood." Sarah offered a grateful smile and made her way to the corner table where James Thornton sat. He was a tall, lean man with piercing blue eyes and an air of mystery about him. He looked up as she approached, a hint of surprise crossing his face before he broke into a warm smile. "Ms. Winters, I presume," he said, rising to his feet to greet her. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, extending her hand. They shook hands, and she took a seat opposite him. "Please call me James," he said, as he gestured for her to sit. "I must admit, I didn't expect you to accept my invitation so quickly." Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of curiosity about the man seated across from her. "Your letter intrigued me," she admitted. "I've never encountered anything quite like it." James nodded solemnly. Ravenswood has a way of drawing people in, even when they're unaware of its pull. As the conversation continued, James shared more about the village and its peculiar history. He spoke of generations of families who had called Ravenswood home, of superstitions and folklore that had been passed down through the ages. He described the sense of isolation that permeated the village and the wary attitude of its residents towards outsiders. Sarah couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease as James spoke. It was as if the very atmosphere of Ravenswood had seeped into her bones, filling her with a quiet dread. She had expected a certain level of mystery and intrigue, but this was something else entirely. "What is it that you're searching for in Ravenswood?" Sarah asked, her curiosity overcoming her unease. James leaned in, his voice lowered to a hushed tone. "I believe there's something here, something that defies explanation. People in this village have experienced inexplicable phenomena, dreams that become reality, memories that blur with the past, and a darkness that clings to their minds." Sarah's analytical mind seized on the possibilities. "Are you suggesting that the village itself has some sort of influence on the minds of its residents?" James nodded. "Precisely. I've been researching Ravenswood for years, and I've come to believe that it's a place where the boundaries between reality and the unknown are blurred. But to truly understand it, we need to delve deeper, to uncover the silent secrets that lie within." Their conversation continued late into the night, the inn's candlelight casting flickering shadows across their faces. Sarah couldn't deny the intrigue she felt, the pull of the village and the enigma it represented. As the hour grew late, she decided to stay at the inn, accepting the innkeeper's offer of a room for the night. Alone in her room, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into a world where reality and the unknown converged. Her rational mind wrestled with the unexplainable stories she had heard, the unsettling atmosphere of the village, and the enigmatic man named James Thornton. As she lay in bed, sleep eluding her, Sarah's thoughts turned to her own past, to the childhood memory she had tried so hard to forget. The shadows seemed to dance in the corners of her room, and she couldn't help but wonder if Ravenswood held the answers she had been seeking for so long. Tomorrow, she thought, she would begin her investigation of Ravenswood Village in earnest, determined to uncover the silent secrets that lay hidden within its mist-shrouded streets. The following morning, Sarah awoke to the muted light of dawn filtering through the curtains of her room at the inn. She had spent a restless night, her dreams filled with shadows and half-formed nightmares. It was as if the very essence of Ravenswood had seeped into her subconscious, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease. As she dressed and made her way downstairs, she found the inn's common room bustling with activity. Locals gathered around wooden tables, their hushed conversations pausing as they cast curious glances in her direction. The atmosphere was charged with a strange mixture of curiosity and wariness. James Thornton was already seated at their usual corner table, a steaming cup of tea before him. He looked up as Sarah approached, his eyes revealing a hint of weariness from a night of research. "Good morning," he greeted her, his voice carrying a note of excitement. Sarah couldn't help but smile in return. "Good morning, James. I trust you've been hard at work?" "Indeed," he replied, gesturing to a stack of old books and journals scattered across the table. "I've been scouring these texts for any mention of Ravenswood's peculiarities. It seems that the village's history is shrouded in mystery." Over breakfast, they discussed their plan for the day. James had arranged for them to meet with some of the villagers, individuals who had experienced the unexplainable firsthand. It was clear that he had already established a rapport with some of them, despite the villagers' initial reservations towards outsiders. Their first meeting was with a middle-aged woman named Eleanor, who had lived in Ravenswood her entire life. Her stories were a mixture of folklore and personal experiences, tales of dreams that foretold the future and memories that blurred with the past. "Ravenswood has always been a place of whispers," she explained, her eyes darting nervously around the room as if fearing eavesdroppers. "We've learned not to speak of the things we see and hear. It's best not to draw their attention." "Whose attention?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. Eleanor hesitated for a moment before leaning in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The shadows," she said, her words tinged with fear. "They come at night, whispering in the dark. They know our secrets, our fears, and they use them against us." Sarah exchanged a knowing glance with James. It was clear that the psychological elements of Ravenswood's mysteries were deeply intertwined with the villagers' beliefs and experiences. Their next meeting was with an elderly man named Albert, who spoke of a long-forgotten experiment conducted in the village decades ago. He claimed that the experiment had delved into the depths of the human mind, blurring the lines between reality and illusion. "Those who participated," Albert explained, his voice trembling with age, "were never the same. They spoke of visions, of alternate realities, and of a darkness that consumed them. Some disappeared altogether, their minds lost to the shadows." Sarah's psychological instincts kicked into high gear as she listened to Albert's account. It was becoming increasingly clear that the village's history was a complex tapestry of psychological phenomena, superstition, and unexplained events. As the day wore on, Sarah and James continued to interview villagers, each story adding a layer to the enigma that was Ravenswood. There were tales of dreams that seemed to manifest in reality, of memories that shifted and warped, and of a pervasive sense of dread that clung to the village like a shroud. By the time evening descended upon Ravenswood, Sarah couldn't deny the weight of the stories they had heard. It was as if the village itself held the collective consciousness of its residents, a consciousness that was both haunting and elusive. Back at the inn, as they settled into their room, Sarah couldn't help but share her thoughts with James. "There's something here, James," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Something that defies explanation, something that's deeply ingrained in the minds of the villagers." James nodded, his eyes reflecting her sentiments. "I believe we're on the brink of a discovery that could change our understanding of the human mind itself, but we must proceed with caution. Ravenswood is a place of silent secrets, and those secrets are not easily uncovered." As the night settled over the village, Sarah lay in her bed, her mind racing with thoughts of the day's revelations. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something extraordinary, something that would challenge the very boundaries of their understanding. But as she closed her eyes, sleep eluding her once more, she couldn't help but wonder about the shadows that Eleanor had spoken of, the whispers in the night that seemed to know the deepest fears and secrets of Ravenswood's residents. The darkness of the village seemed to be closing in, and Sarah knew that the journey into the unknown was far from over. The following morning dawned with a heavy mist blanketing Ravenswood. the village's ancient buildings shrouded in a spectral haze. Sarah and James had agreed that their next step should be to investigate the village's history more closely, hoping to uncover the roots of the psychological mysteries that had gripped its residents for generations. They decided to visit the local library, a quaint yet weathered building nestled at the heart of the village. As they entered, the air inside felt heavy with the scent of old books, and the library's caretaker, a frail woman with wispy gray hair, welcomed them with a mixture of curiosity and reservation. "We're interested in the history of Ravenswood," Sarah explained, her tone polite but firm. "Particularly, any records of experiments or studies conducted here in the past." The caretaker hesitated for a moment, her gaze flickering towards the dusty shelves that lined the room. "I'm not sure what you're looking for," she admitted, "but I can show you what we have." As Sarah and James delved into the library's archives, they discovered a wealth of documents that hinted at Ravenswood's enigmatic past. Old journals and faded manuscripts told of a village that had long been obsessed with the human mind, with experiments that blurred the lines between reality and illusion. One document in particular caught their attention, an account of an experiment conducted in the 18th century by a local doctor named Elias Blackwood. The experiment had delved into the depths of the human psyche, seeking to unlock the secrets of the mind itself. James read aloud from the document, his voice filled with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. Dr. Blackwood believed that the human mind held the power to shape reality itself. He sought to explore the boundaries of perception, to push the limits of human consciousness. Sarah listened intently, her mind racing with thoughts. It sounds like the experiment was an early attempt at what we now call psychological manipulation. Dr. Blackwood may have unwittingly tapped into something that affected the villagers on a profound level. James nodded in agreement. It's possible that the experiment left a lasting imprint on the collective consciousness of Ravenswood, leading to the psychological phenomena we've encountered. Their research continued throughout the day, uncovering more details about Dr. Blackwood's experiment and its far-reaching consequences. It appeared that those who had participated in the experiment had reported visions, dreams, and altered states of consciousness, much like the stories they had heard from the villagers. As evening descended over Ravenswood, Sarah and James decided to visit the abandoned chapel mentioned in their research. It was said to be the site where Dr. Blackwood had conducted his most controversial experiments, and they believed it might hold further clues to the village's mysteries. The chapel stood on the outskirts of the village, its stone walls weathered and crumbling. Ivy climbed its facade, and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees added to the eerie atmosphere. The heavy wooden door creaked open as they entered, revealing a dimly lit interior. The chapel's pews were covered in dust and cobwebs, and the air inside felt stagnant and oppressive. At the altar, they discovered a hidden entrance beneath, a worn rug, a staircase that led down into darkness. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the first step. She couldn't deny the growing sense of unease that gripped her. "Are you sure about this, James?" she asked. He met her gaze with determination. "We need to go deeper, to unearth the past and confront the mysteries of Ravenswood. This may be our best chance to do so." With that, they descended into the depths of the chapel, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. As they ventured further underground, the air grew colder, and the sense of foreboding intensified. In the depths of the chapel's hidden chamber, they would uncover secrets that had remained buried for centuries. Secrets that would challenge the very fabric of their understanding and bring them face to face with the darkest aspects of the human mind. The staircase seemed to descend into an abyss of darkness, the beams of their flashlights piercing the gloom like feeble beacons. Each step they took echoed in the narrow, stone-walled passage, a steady rhythm that resonated with the growing tension in their hearts. As they descended further, the air grew colder, and the oppressive weight of the underground surroundings pressed upon them. The walls of the chamber were damp and faint. Cryptic symbols adorned the stone, hinting at rituals long forgotten. Sarah couldn't help but feel a growing sense of trepidation. The whispers of the villagers and the stories they had uncovered in the library weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't shake the thought that they were delving into something beyond their comprehension. James, however, remained resolute, his determination unwavering. He led the way with a focused intensity, his flashlight casting stark shadows on the chamber's walls. It was as if he had been drawn to this place by an irresistible force, a force that sought answers to the enigma of Ravenswood. Finally, they reached the chamber's entrance, an arched stone doorway covered in centuries-old cobwebs. With a sense of trepidation, James pushed it open, revealing the heart of the underground chamber. The sight that greeted them was like something out of a nightmare. The chamber was vast and cavernous, its walls adorned with macabre paintings and intricate, otherworldly symbols. In the center of the room stood an ancient stone altar, upon which rested an open book, its pages filled with cryptic writings. But what truly sent shivers down their spines were the shadows. They swirled and danced across the chamber's walls, their movements seemingly independent of any light source. It was as if the very shadows themselves were alive, sentient beings that whispered secrets and harbored dark intentions. Sarah's heart raced as she took in the surreal scene. The chamber seemed to exist beyond the realm of reason, a place where the boundaries of reality and the unknown converged. She couldn't help but wonder if the experiments conducted here had unleashed forces that were now beyond their control. James approached the stone altar, his eyes fixated on the open book. As he reached out to touch it, the shadows seemed to recoil, as if in response to his presence. He began to read aloud from the pages, his voice resonating through the chamber. The words were a strange, hypnotic blend of Latin and archaic English. And as James continued to speak, the shadows on the walls seemed to coalesce, forming into vague, spectral shapes. The air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness, and Sarah felt as if the very atmosphere itself had come alive with an ancient, malevolent energy. Suddenly, a vision overtook her, a vision of a time long past, of Dr. Elias Blackwood conducting his experiments in this very chamber. She saw faces contorted in fear, heard cries of anguish, and felt the overwhelming weight of despair that had hung in the air. It was as if the chamber itself was replaying the horrors of the past. Sarah gasped and stumbled back, her mind reeling from the intensity of the vision. She reached out to James, who was still engrossed in reading from the book, but he seemed entranced by the words, his eyes unseeing. Desperation seized Sarah as she realized that the shadows were closing in around them, their ethereal forms becoming more defined and menacing. She grabbed James by the arm and shook him, trying to break his trance. "James!" she cried, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to leave, now!" Finally, James snapped out of his reverie, his eyes wide with alarm. He nodded, and they turned to flee the chamber, their flashlights cutting through the encroaching darkness. But the shadows seemed to resist their escape, swirling and reaching out as if to drag them back into the depths of the chamber. With every step they took towards the exit, the shadows closed in, their whispers growing louder and more sinister. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she felt the malevolent presence of the chamber pressing upon her. As they finally burst out of the underground chamber and back into the narrow stone passage, the shadows seemed to retreat, leaving them in blessed silence. Gasping for breath, they leaned against the damp walls, their minds reeling from the experience. What was that place? Sarah stammered, her voice trembling. James shook his head, his face pale. "I'm not sure, but it's clear that the experiments conducted here left a lasting imprint on the village and its residents. We've uncovered something far more complex and sinister than we could have ever imagined. Their encounter with the Chamber of Shadows had shaken them to their core, and they knew that their journey into the mysteries of Ravenswood had taken an even darker turn. As they made their way back to the surface, they couldn't help but wonder if they had opened a door to something that should have remained forever closed." The echoes of their encounter with the Chamber of Shadows continued to haunt Sarah and James as they made their way back to the surface of the chapel. The very air seemed tainted by the malevolent energy they had witnessed, and they emerged into the dimly lit interior of the chapel with a profound sense of unease. As they stepped out into the daylight, Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep foreboding. The shadows had retreated, but their presence lingered in her mind, like a menacing specter waiting to return. She turned to James, her voice low with concern. "James, what we saw down there, it's beyond anything I've ever encountered in my studies of psychology. It's as if the very essence of the human mind has been twisted and warped." James nodded solemnly, his face etched with the gravity of their discovery. "It's becoming clear that the experiments conducted by Dr. Blackwood unleashed forces that were never meant to be tampered with. The shadows, the whispers, they're a manifestation of the darkness within the human psyche. Their resolve to uncover the truth about Ravenswood had only deepened, but the price they were paying in their pursuit of knowledge was becoming increasingly evident. The psychological toll of their experiences weighed heavily on them, and they knew that they were now dealing with forces that transcended the realm of science and reason. As they made their way back to the inn, the villagers they passed by seemed to regard them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they were being watched, if the very walls of Ravenswood held secrets that the villagers were determined to protect. Back in their room at the inn, Sarah and James spent the evening poring over the documents they had collected from the library. It was clear that Dr. Blackwood's experiments had plunged Ravenswood into a darkness that had endured for centuries. But what was the ultimate purpose of those experiments, and what had driven him to delve so deeply into the human mind? As they delved deeper into their research, they came across a name that sent shivers down their spines, a name that appeared in several accounts and documents related to Ravenswood's history, the Orkney of Shadows. According to the writings, the Orkney was said to be a figure of immense power, a being who had harnessed the shadows themselves to unlock the deepest recesses of the human psyche. It was believed that the Oracle's presence had cast a dark shadow over Ravenswood, influencing its residents for generations. Sarah and James couldn't help but feel that they were closing in on a truth that was both elusive and terrifying. The Oracle's influence seemed to be at the heart of the village's mysteries, and they were determined to uncover the nature of this enigmatic figure. As night descended over Ravenswood, Sarah and James knew that they had to confront the Oracle, to seek answers that had eluded them for far too long. They couldn't deny the darkness that had taken hold of the village and the shadows that seemed to have seeped into their very souls. Their journey into the unknown had brought them face to face with the deepest, most unsettling aspects of the human psyche. And as they prepared to confront the Oracle of Shadows, they knew that they were about to confront the darkness within themselves as well. The village of Ravenswood was cloaked in an eerie silence as Sarah and James made their way towards their final destination, the Oracle's domain. The villagers had retreated into their homes, as if sensing the impending confrontation, and the mist clung to the narrow streets like a shroud. Their journey led them to the outskirts of the village, where an ancient, gnarled forest loomed. The path ahead was overgrown and barely discernible, as if nature itself sought to conceal the way to the Oracle's realm. Sarah and James navigated through the dense undergrowth, their determination unshaken by the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded them. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the very air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. Strange, ethereal lights danced among the trees, casting eerie, shifting shadows on the ground. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, and she couldn't help but feel as if they were stepping into a world that defied the laws of nature. Finally, they reached a clearing in the forest, a place where the trees parted to reveal an ancient, weathered stone circle. At the center of the circle stood a massive, gnarled oak tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. It was here that the Oracle of Shadows was said to reside. Sarah and James approached the tree with cautious reverence, their flashlights cutting through the dim light. As they reached the base of the oak, they discovered a large, intricately carved wooden door, an entrance to an underground chamber that lay hidden beneath the roots of the ancient tree. James turned to Sarah, his expression a mixture of determination and apprehension. "This is it, Sarah. The Oracle's chamber lies below. We must confront whatever lies within." Sarah nodded in agreement, her heart pounding in her chest. The knowledge they had gained about the Oracle had only deepened their determination to uncover the truth. She reached for the door, her fingers trembling as she pushed it open, revealing a narrow stone staircase that descended into the darkness. The descent into the underground chamber was steep and winding, and the air grew colder with each step. The walls were adorned with cryptic symbols, and the very stones seemed to pulse with an ancient power. As they reached the chamber's entrance, they were met with a sight that left them speechless. The Oracle's chamber was a vast subterranean expanse, illuminated by an eerie, otherworldly glow. The walls were covered in swirling patterns that seemed to writhe and move of their own accord, and in the center of the chamber stood a figure cloaked in shadows, a being that radiated an aura of immense power. The Oracle's voice echoed through the chamber, a haunting, ethereal melody that sent shivers down their spines. "Welcome, seekers of truth. You have ventured far to uncover the secrets of Ravenswood." Sarah and James stepped forward, their determination unshaken by the presence of the enigmatic figure. "We seek answers," James declared, his voice steady. "Answers about the experiments, the shadows, and the darkness that has gripped this village for generations." The oracle seemed to regard them with a sense of detachment, its form shifting and morphing like a spectre. "The experiments were my doing," it admitted, its voice a melodic whisper. "I sought to unlock the deepest corners of the human psyche, to harness the power of the shadows themselves." Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as she listened to the oracle's words. "But at what cost?" she demanded. "The villagers have suffered for centuries, trapped in a cycle of fear and darkness." The oracle's form seemed to waver, as if in contemplation. "The experiments were a double-edged sword," it acknowledged. "They opened doors to the unknown, but they also unleashed forces beyond our control. The shadows that haunt Ravenswood are a manifestation of the darkness within us all." James stepped forward, his voice resolute. "We want to understand, to find a way to end the suffering of the villagers, and put an end to the darkness." The oracle regarded them with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. "To break the cycle, you must confront your own inner demons. Face the darkness within yourselves." With those words, the oracle's form seemed to dissolve into the shadows, leaving Sarah and James alone in the chamber. The very air seemed to crackle with energy, as if the oracle's final challenge had been issued. As they made their way back to the surface, Sarah and James couldn't help but feel that their journey into the unknown was far from over. The darkness within Ravenswood and the shadows that clung to its residents were deeply intertwined with their own psyches, and they knew that confronting their inner demons would be their greatest challenge yet. The village of Ravenswood, with its silent secrets and enigmatic past, had irrevocably changed them. And as they emerged from the forest and back into the mist-shrouded village, they knew that the path to uncovering the truth would be fraught with peril and uncertainty. In the days that followed their encounter with the oracle, Ravenswood seemed to hold its breath, as if the village itself anticipated the outcome of Sarah and James's journey into the depths of their own psyches. The mist that shrouded the village took on an even denser, more oppressive quality, and the shadows seemed to linger in the corners of every street. Sarah and James retreated to the inn, their minds filled with the weight of the oracle's words. To confront the darkness within themselves, to break the cycle of fear and suffering in Ravenswood, it was a daunting task, one that seemed insurmountable. As they sat in their room, poring over the documents they had collected and the memories of their experiences, they began to realize that the key to understanding the village's mysteries lay in their own pasts. The shadows of Ravenswood were not just external forces. They were reflections of their own inner demons. Sarah found herself drawn back to a long-buried memory from her childhood, a memory of a traumatic event that had shaped her fears and insecurities. She had spent years suppressing it, but now it loomed in her mind, demanding to be acknowledged. James, too, confronted his own demons, a sense of guilt that had haunted him for years, stemming from a decision he had made long ago. The shadows of Ravenswood seemed to feed on these unresolved emotions, amplifying them until they threatened to consume him. Together, Sarah and James embarked on a journey of self-discovery, delving into the darkest recesses of their own minds. It was a painful process, one filled with anguish and turmoil, but it was also a necessary one. They had to confront their own shadows in order to confront the shadows that haunted Ravenswood. As they worked through their past traumas and fears, they began to notice a change in the atmosphere of the village. The mist began to dissipate, and the shadows that had once clung to the villagers seemed to retreat. It was as if their own inner battles were having a tangible effect on the village itself. Finally, one fateful evening, Sarah and James felt ready to face the oracle once more. They returned to the ancient oak tree and descended into the underground chamber, their hearts filled with a newfound sense of purpose. The oracle awaited them, its form swirling in the shadows. "Have you confronted your inner demons?" it asked, its voice a haunting echo. Sarah and James nodded, their voices resolute. "We have," they declared in unison. "We understand that the darkness within ourselves is reflected in the darkness of Ravenswood." The oracle regarded them with a sense of approval. "Then you have taken the first step towards breaking the cycle." With that, the oracle's form began to waver, its presence diminishing until it faded into the shadows completely. It was as if the oracle had fulfilled its purpose, and the village of Ravenswood was free from its influence. As Sarah and James emerged from the underground chamber, they were met with a sight they had never seen before. The village bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, the mist finally dispersing to reveal a tranquil, peaceful landscape. The villagers, too, seemed transformed. Their faces were no longer etched with fear, and a sense of serenity had settled over Ravenswood. It was as if the shadows that had haunted the village for generations had finally been vanquished. Sarah and James knew that their journey had come to an end, that they had uncovered the truth of Ravenswood and broken the cycle of darkness. They had confronted their own inner demons and, in doing so, had liberated the village from the grip of its silent secrets. As they left Ravenswood behind, they couldn't help but feel a sense of closure and redemption. The journey into the unknown had been harrowing and unsettling, but it had also been a journey of self-discovery and growth. Ravenswood, with its enigmatic past and its shadows that whispered in the night, would forever remain a part of their memories. It was a place where the boundaries between reality and the unknown had blurred, where the darkness within themselves had been unveiled and confronted. And, as they walked away from the mist-shrouded village, they carried with them the knowledge that sometimes the most profound mysteries were not found in the external world, but within the depths of one's own soul.